you were here last week, you would have saw, those who were here last week, you saw that when Europeans, the British and other groups came across African people in an effort to study and enslave them and make prisoners of them. So that's another thing. They are prisoners of war, right? Because they are coming involuntarily from African nation states, nation kingdoms, right? And so this issue becomes important as to why they intentionally did not do this in Dred Scott. So Dred Scott was not a citizen and could not have been a citizen, and Taney knew that. The ruling European elite knew that. They understood that clearly. That's why they didn't bring it up. They skipped over it, and now we don't have any memory of that. And it was deliberate, but we have to look closely at Worcester versus Georgia and do a comparative analysis between Worcester and Dred Scott.
So real quick, so the Pelman Farmer reparations case, we lost, or it didn't give us anything that we were looking for, is because we argued the wrong thing.
Yes.
So we argue repair as far as money and economics, which the Judge Posner said he can't calculate. However, what needs to be argued in future cases is the continuous harm of not connecting us to our
nation
states, and that is the harm that the international courts have to deal with. They can't escape that, because the United States laid the precedents in Worcester versus Georgia with an inquiry and took us completely out of the inquiry at the same time that we're being slaves.
Right.
Well, the whole thing is that it's altogether, this is all international interest. You can't separate any one particular aspect of it away from the international arena. So when you're speaking of governments crossing water, territorial water, coming into another structured government by an aggressive body, it's all international. So as you address these things today, I'm saying so because I'm addressing it right that you're speaking to in the Western right now.
Human rights,
on
yes.
the issues of reparations.
Yes.
From one particular point on the issues of human rights violations.
Yes.
And from a viewpoint of ancestry. So the whole thing is when we seem to concentrate from this being just here politically as a from the state, it's really an international platform. And until we address it on an international platform, we're never going to get it.
Yeah, we're clear that it's an international.
But I think he was very clear. It is a political question,
yes,
more than the other questions, because they know they can't make it similarly situated. Because with the Native Americans, they protected their political structures, even though they put them in reservations. They were still chiefs, right?
Right.
We still connected to nations, right? But they harmed us by trying to separate us from it. So it's a political question.
We have examples, though. All the way up, remember, you weren't here last week, but I dealt a little with Africatown. And I talked a little earlier about Bobby Wright, who created, the psychologist who created the term menticide. In Africatown, and he's a descendant of those Africans who came over on the alleged last slave ship in 1859. And in 1859, he was a young boy, 10, I think, and died in 1934. And his whole lineage is still in Alabama, right? And so, and it's called Africatown, and they had a king. They had kings. Those kings lived, and it still may be there. We don't know. They still may have that family structure of government right there. It still may be very active. They had a king, they had high priests, they had an entire, all the clans there were set up as clans that had government bodies. He died in 1934. So all of his children, his lineage, they're all there. His grandchildren are still there. And those families, I'm almost sure that if the proper conscious anthropologists went there and did a study today, they would find that system of government still there. They had a king. I mean, at least we know, according to Kujo, who died in 1930, there was a king there. And then again, we talked about Gullah Geechee. That's a king, all right? That's a kingdom. That's a nation.
I'm Major Joe Womack, 20 years United States Marine Corps, and proud of it. I'm also Major Joe Womack, Africatown born and bred, and proud of it. I always say that because I found that there are some people that I grew up with and know that come out of Africatown and done well. They don't want to admit they're from Africatown. But I was taught by my parents and by especially Mr. Henry C. Williams, who was the first and only historian from Africatown, that in order to do something and do it well, you gotta own it. You gotta home up to it and do it well, and you will, as long as you accept who you are. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get the word out about Africatown, and because it's something that we're proud of, the residents of Africatown are proud of, and we want the rest of the world to know about Africatown. Now, I mentioned Henry C. Williams being the first and only historian from Africatown. He was the first one to write a book. And this is one that he gave me back in the middle 70s called Africatown, U.S.A. But he was the first one to write the book. There have been several written about it. But what we're doing, myself and others, is getting the word out and to make people know and understand what Africatown is all about. The story I'm about to relate to you is the way that Henry Williams told it to us when we were in Sunday school on Sunday mornings often. When I first heard it when I was 5 years old. In 1808, this country said that's enough of the slave trade. And so they ruled the slave trade illegal, which meant that you couldn't bring any more slaves into this country from other countries. Now, the slave trade was still going on throughout the rest of the world, but here in this country it was illegal. Slavery itself was legal, but you just couldn't have the slave trade. So they had enough slaves in this country to breed their own, basically. Now, just like any law, after they passed this law, people were still breaking it. And so the government 2 years later, in 1810, said, look here, we mean business. So if you're caught in the slave trade business, we're going to prosecute you, take you to court, and hang you. And so after that law was instituted, slavery was not recorded. Again, the slave trade was not recorded in this country, and unless it went underground. And it went that way for a long time until the Civil War began looming over the horizon. In 1859, some rich people, plantation owners and land owners and builders and businessmen were at the riverboat gambling, having a good time on Saturday like they always do, like they do now. People go down to the casino. Back then it was the riverboat. And the richest plantation owner and land owner in Mobile County, name was Timothy Mayer. And he made a bet. He said, look here, I bet you I can bring slaves into this country right under the government's nose, and they'll never catch me. The other guy said, no, you can't. He said, yes, I can. They said, no, you can't. He said, yes, I can. They said, well, how much do you bet? He said, I bet you $100,000. Now, we put that to the calculator, and we figured that $100,000 back then is worth about $2.5 million today. And so they shook hands, and the bet was on. Now, Timothy Mill was a powerful man. He wasn't used to losing anything, bets included. And so to win this bet, he put up another $150,000 to secure the bet, to make sure that he did the right things to win the bet. So he went out and hired the best sea captain on the Gulf Coast, Captain Foster, out of Mississippi. And together they crafted a sailboat. Remember I told you he was a shipbuilder. And this sailboat was not like any other slave ship. It looked like it was a schooner. It looked like a pleasure boat today. It was fast. It was sleek. But it had a hole big enough to hold 100 people. And that was part of the bet. You got to bring back 100 people. And so they put the boat together, the sailboat together. And he hired a crew, Captain Foster did. And they sailed off to Africa to get the slaves. Well, remember I told you that the slave trade was still profitable. And it was happening throughout the rest of the world, especially in South America. And the tribes over in Africa were fighting each other. And the one that would capture the other one, put them in bondage, and sell them to the people buying the slaves to bring back for slavery. So real profitable to them. Now you had two tribes on the west coast of Africa, west coast of Ghana, the Tokbar and the Dahomey tribes. And they were fighting. Now the Tokbar beat the Dahomey and put them in bondage. So Captain Foster sailed this ship around the west coast of Africa, and he purchased, remember the bet was for 100 people. He purchased 110 slaves. The youngest one being 5, the oldest one being about 25. And his reasoning was behind, for $100 a piece, his reasoning behind that was because it was a tough road back over to this country for 100 people, 100 really inside the hole, and he figured that 10 of them would die, 10%. So he purchased 110. Well, these were strong people, none of them died. They all made it. So on the trip back, to make sure that he was not caught, he came a long way up through the Caribbean and making stops as he came back to his country like he was a tourist, sailing up the Caribbean, enjoying the islands. Well, things being as they were, there are some good people in this country. And they got the word to the government that this bet was on. So the government people were out there waiting on them along the Mississippi River. Well, Timothy Mill got the word down to Captain Foster he was coming up, that they were waiting on him. So they fashioned a backup plan. And the backup plan was, when you get close to the Mississippi, when you get close to the Mobile River, we will offload the slaves onto a riverboat, and they did, and bring them ashore on a riverboat. And the authorities were expecting a sailboat. Well, they offloaded them, and when they did that in the dark of the night, they sailed this brand new ship out to the middle of the Mobile Bay. They burned it and sank it. So they destroyed the evidence. So they never saw them bringing any people ashore, never saw the boat. But the government still brought him to trial and tried to prosecute him, but they didn't. They were found innocent. And so he won that bet. In the meantime, the people that he brought ashore, the Mill brothers, divided them up. They sold some of them. But the Mill brothers got the bulk of them. Captain Foster got 10 of them. And this was in 1860. They came ashore in July the 8th, 1860. So that's the thing that put Africatown on the National Historical Register. That was the last recorded shipment of slaves coming into this country, July the 8th, 1860. So that's a historical fact that belongs to us, Africatown. Now, that group of people were not slaves long, because the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, and the Civil War ended in 1865. So when they were set free on that land in which they came ashore, which is now Africatown. The Mill family told them that they could take the land and live on. Well, they set up a community of their own. Now, they didn't know much about American law, but they knew about the law, the tribal law, where they came from. So the laws that they set up were based upon the laws of a tribe back in Africa, which made them the first community in this country of freed slaves, in which the laws resemble the same laws as a tribe back in Africa. So that's the second historical fact. Now, they knew the value of land, so they began to work and they began to purchase the land away from the Mayer family. They allowed them to purchase the land. And so they own most of the land in which they lived in. And the government told them that, look, you have these children you're raising here and growing, you got to educate them. So they established a school back in 1880. That school eventually evolved into the Mobile County Training School, which was the first training school for blacks in the state of Alabama. Now, training is just simply a code word for black. So basically, the first black school, public school in the state of Alabama. People used to often ask me, what they train y'all over there? Well, they didn't train us to milk cows or gut pigs, anything like that. We had the same education as the regular public school. The only difference was when I opened my book that I got every year was said Property of Murphy High School. So we got their hand-me-down books about 2 years after that. You know, they would keep a book for 2 years and get a new one and would bring it on down to us. But it didn't stop the graduates of that school from going on and doing great things. You know, we were known in sports. We have Hall of Famers coming from the area. Billy Williams came from our school, Hall of Famer for Chicago Cub. Hank Aaron grew up within a stone's throw of the community. Home run king. Willie McCovey, Satchel Paige played baseball over in the community. Even Ozzie Smith, he was born in the area. And so those are Hall of Famers, and we had two that played high school baseball together, Cleon Jones and Tommy Agee, that went on to help the New York Mets win their first world championship back in 1969, the Miracle Mets. So we experienced great success, especially in sports and other things at that school. And so, and this school, Mobile County Training School, was accredited in 1910, which made it the first public school in Mobile County to be accredited. And there were private schools, of course, but it was first public school. So there's rich history in the community, in the Africatown community and Mobile County Training School. 4 points of history: the last slave shipment, first community in which the laws was based on a tribal law, first school for blacks in the state of Alabama, and the first school, public school, to be accredited in Mobile County. And so it has a rich tradition, and we're doing our best to keep it up. The school still exists. The community is still intact. And we're doing our best to keep those things intact and to even make them better. And that's our goal, to make things better, because we had a rich tradition of companionship and ownership within the community that was passed down from generation. And unfortunately now we're experiencing a struggle trying to keep industry out, more industry. There's industry in the area, and we're trying to keep them more from coming out, because we live through pollution of international paper and scrap paper, and we don't want to see that happen to our descendants years from now. We want them to grow up and enjoy freedom, education, and expression, and anything else, just like people in the rest of the world, and not having to worry about a storage tank blowing up in the middle of the night and hurting someone. So that's why we love the school, love the community, and we fight for what's right within the community. And the only thing I can say is well, the story continues, and that's what we want. We want the story to continue for decades and get better, and that's what we're striving for. What we're really looking for is people that want to do whatever they can do wherever they are. If it's a financial donation, we've established a nonprofit organization here in the community called the Africatown Community Development Corporation. We also have another organization that we're using to fight and keep pollution and heavy industry out of the area, called Mobile Environmental Justice Action Coalition. And of course, we have the Mobile County Training School Alumni Association, which is a strong organization. And so with those three organizations, if there's some financial contribution that someone can help out with, grant writers and grants and foundations and stuff like that, we'll be glad to get that type of assistance. Also, we want to renovate some of the older homes in the area, and the community already have a good reputation, and we think that we're a good area for starter homes for young people that want to get in a home safe, that's safe, the community is safe, and their kids can have a good recreation and good education. Home somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000, $30,000 to $40,000, and get a good start in life, and maybe move on or just stay right here. So that's the thing that we're trying to do, and we know that we have the rich history, and we think that we can be a big part of Mobile's tourism. And so those are the things that we're working to try to improve for our community. Africatown is bounded on three sides by water. North part is Hog Bayou, which is part of the Tensas River Delta, the largest delta in the state of Alabama, and is actually protected by the National Wildlife Association. Unfortunately, with the exception of that little piece that backs up to Africatown, but we're working on that. And to the east is the Mobile River, and to the south is the 3 Mile Creek. So International Paper used to sit on a portion of Hog Bayou, but they moved out years ago because they refused to improve their pollution control facility. And that piece is open. So what we're looking to do is take that piece that's open right now, where you can actually walk out to the bayou, and turn it into some type of RV facility, a place where people can launch their boats into the bayou, or even a fishing pier. And that's what we're looking to do with that area. We're also looking to establish a museum. We have some artifacts that date back to the old days, and we're looking to establish a welcome center. And we actually want to rebuild the Mayhair plantation. That's the plantation of the people that brought the slaves over. That was part of the history, so we want to rebuild it and use that as a tourist attraction, so people can walk in and get an idea of what it may have looked like years ago. And so with those things, we think that we can, and we're only 5 minutes from downtown Mobile. So it's within walking distance, bicycling distance, and so it's a place of tourism that's been added on the African American Heritage Tour, and with just a little bit more imagination and cleanup, we can make it probably the second or third best tourist attraction here in Mobile County. I'd just like to say that we here in Africatown are proud of the community and proud of our descendants, proud of the ones that raised us and showed us the direction to go. And we're trying to do the same to the next generation. We want the next generation to be proud of who they are, where they came from, and we want to leave them a legacy that they'll be proud of. And with you all's help, we can do that.
Living in Africatown, the community is a very close-knit community, but there have been lots of health problems, environmental problems because of the industry that very near the community. Environmental, the weather, the debris and everything that we've gotten from the industry that's here. But the living is fine. We're now right now we're sitting in the community garden, and this is something that was this year. It was dedicated, and anyone that wants to have a garden out here, they're welcome to have a garden. But industry that wants to settle in our community is always industry that's going to be harmful health-wise and environmental-wise. And we would like to see some positive industry come here, and so that people can come to Africatown and tour Africatown and see the history, because this is a very historical place. They docked the ship at the Mobile River down the hill from here, and they let the slaves that was on the ship, they just told them, you can go. And the slaves came up the hill to Plateau. And Plateau is a level piece of land that sits on a hill. And this is where the slaves settled, was in Plateau. And one of the slaves that's well known was Kudjoe Lewis. And Kudjoe Lewis is buried in this cemetery in Dahomey, and the slaves that got off that ship are buried there. And he helped to found the Union Baptist, Missionary Baptist Church that sits over there on Bay Bridge Road. And this is how Africatown was started. Mobile County Training School is it's a historical school, and they have interesting events going on there, and it has quite a bit of history, a lot of history. So I just like to mention that it was the first black high school in the state of Alabama. So that's very historical, but it's a middle school now. The only negative thing is last year they ran a pipeline across the school playground, and the children were not able to come out and play on the playground last year. A potential tank farm would be a disaster to this community in the event that lightning strikes or that there's a leak or a tornado. We are in tornado and hurricane area, and if any one of those things came through or lightning would strike a tank, Africatown would be destroyed. And I would say it's less than a quarter of a mile from our community. It's right across the street from our community, and it would be no way that we could be saved, because this would be a sudden thing. You don't have a warning when there's a tank explosion or anything. There's no prior warning. So that would be disastrous for this community. The Environmental Justice Act is being ignored, because the Environmental Justice Act is to protect especially community like ours from hazardous industry. We're not just Africatown environmental justice, we are Mobile environmental justice in this city of Mobile, and there are things that they're wanting to do downtown, bring tank farm downtown, and we don't want it, and so and other people are being involved, supporting us in what we are trying to keep from happening out here. It would also keep it from happening in their area also, here in Mobile. And to rezone as industry can bring all kind of industry in here and just completely shut down the community. And this is something that we don't want, and we will continue to fight to keep the community as a community and zone as residential. We will fight as long as we possibly can, necessary, to keep this as a zone, as a residential area.